Hi, I'm Selena Wang. Thank you from Oberlin College representing the Summon Working Group. Thank you for joining us.
Let's talk about really discovering what users are discovering within a Summon website. And really, this comes from my 2 to 3 years of really working with Google Tag Manager on our Summon instance to really get some more meaningful data to help complement those OBI analytics reports. And basically what I realized is after dabbling so much within Google Tag Manager, I could easily export all of my work and allow other people to import it so they can actually also get access to this wonderful data that we can mine from Google Analytics. Before we go right into Google Tag Manager, let's first talk a little bit about the value of using Google Analytics. We've already heard about how we can use it to help assess the user experience. We can measure to see when people are coming to our sites, if they're leaving our sites, if they're searching our sites, how they're engaging with our sites. We can also use Google Analytics to measure user interest in the library's collection. By doing just a few customizations, we can actually start seeing, are they clicking on ebooks versus journal articles versus dissertations? We can see what content users are going for. We can actually understand how users are searching and discovering our content. Are they using those facets? Are they using those facets correctly or incorrectly? And of course, we can also use Google Analytics to troubleshoot. We can actually see, oh, well, here we can clearly see there was an error there. How can we make that better so that we can predict these problems before they actually occur? Now, I love Google Analytics. I've been dabbling in it for over 10 years, but I'm going to say it's definitely not perfect. By default, Google Analytics likes to track only page views, which is very limiting, especially when it comes to the Summon instance. But you can take the time to have it track any user action or data points you want. And notice I have an asterisk by that word any. Basically, if Google Analytics can recognize that data, it can be tracked. And usually this does require a little bit of advanced knowledge of JavaScript or some kind of scripting. However, using Google Tag Manager makes it so much easier. Before we jump into really the heavy lifting part of this presentation, I really want to make sure we are clear about what I'm talking about when I use some of these Google Analytics or these digital analytics jargon. Basically, an event is an action on a web page. An action can be anything like a click, scrolling, a video playthrough. It could be whatever you define as a desirable action. You can even have track different link clicks differently. For example, you could have one event tracking link clicks to like a navigation menu versus link clicks to specific like interlibrary loan resources. You can even be that distinguish between those two. So an event is just an action. Custom dimensions is a really critical point in using Google Analytics, and this really allows you to send any data point on a web page to Google Analytics. So if you ever want to scrape something from a web page and see it in context with Google Analytics data, you can do that using the custom dimensions option. So again, when I say custom dimensions, just refer to any kind of data point on a web page. And if you're just like, oh, event tracking, that sounds really helpful. If you're already using Google Analytics and you're loading it via your Summon admin console, events are already being tracked in Summon for you automatically. You can actually go into your Google Analytics report and you can go to the event report, which is under the behavior section. And you can see there's a search event being tracked, scroll event, refinement, sort, save search. So there's already a lot of content that you get just by using the Google Analytics option within the Summon Administration Console. But let's say if you wanted more data, as we saw in the previous case studies, is that they were able to customize Google Analytics to track data points they wanted. And you just need to take the time to do it. Or you can go ahead and leverage the pre-configured Google Tag Manager container I have already crafted. So let's take a look about some of the data that we can also track. And that is really using Google Tag Manager. Now, we've already been talking a lot about Google Tag Manager. If you haven't had a chance to play with it yet, that's okay. Basically, it's a tag manager service, and it's a really elegant way of controlling all the various scripts that you have on your website. And basically, it takes all the scripts from your website, puts it into the Google Tag Manager interface, and organizes all those scripts into tags. It even has versioning control, so you can roll back mistakes or you can go back to earlier versions if you needed to. Just so I could just point out how really great this is. Previously, if you were to implement Google Analytics event tracking, you would honestly, let's say you want to track when people are clicking on item title links. You'd have to put a piece of script on that title, that title, that title, and so on. Now instead, you can just use Google Tag Manager, load the Google Tag Manager script to your summon console, and do all that wonderful scripting over in the Google Tag Manager interface without having to touch this. So it really was a great advancement that you can use in Summon. So let's take a look about how some of this new data looks like. So here's an example of my event report using our Google Analytics deployed through Google Tag Manager. I've customized it to track certain link clicks, item interactions, and that kind of thing. In fact, let's go ahead and look at it in real life. So we can go in, and let's say I wanted to do item interaction. I've defined item interaction as, say, if someone didn't click on the full text but are maybe doing other meaningful actions with that specific resource link in there, such as perhaps they're citing it, maybe they're emailing the resource, maybe they're using the permalink option. With using the secondary dimension, I can actually pull in the custom dimensions that I've crafted, such as the item title. So I can go in and see what item title is being used. I could also use different custom dimensions, such as content type, to see, oh, a lot of people are citing journal articles and ebooks or books. So you can see there's a lot of great data in here. Now, if you're one of these people that say, oh, don't make me go into the Google Analytics interface, I really find no meaning from it, it's not super helpful, I completely understand that. I've been in Google Analytics for over 10 years at this point, so it's kind of my go-to source. But in our library, our Summon instance is kind of managed by 5 people. I'm the main point person who has access to the administration console, and then we have other people contributing to some of the enhancements we do, that kind of thing. So I really had to make this content discoverable to them as well. And Google Analytics wasn't always the best way. Instead, we opted to use Google Data Studio. Again, another free Google product. It is a data visualization tool that works nicely with other Google products as well as just spreadsheets. This data visualization tool is nowhere near as robust as, say, Tableau or Power BI, but it works nicely with Google Analytics and syncs directly with that information. So here's an example of a quick little dashboard I threw together based on the data I'm gathering from our Summon instance. I can look to see clicks by content type. I can see clicks by search result position. I was kind of curious to see if people were actually scrolling. Turns out they don't. No surprise there. I can go in and even drill down to specific item titles to see what content are people trying to find, as well as how users are interacting by content type. And this is just a small example of a dashboard I was able to put together based on this new data I'm collecting using Google Analytics. So, how can you implement Google Tag Manager on your Summon site if you would like to? Well, that's the whole point of this webinar. Let's talk about an easy way to do it if you haven't already done so. Basically, you need to go create a new Google Tag Management container. And that's pretty simple. You just go to the GTM website, click create an account if you don't already have one, and then create your first container. Next, you can, if you would like to use my option, you can go to GitHub, to specifically my GitHub page, and download the pre-configured Google Tag Manager containers that I have created and posted there. So you can see these over here. And so they're pretty much 2 JSON files that I have. I have one that is labeled standard and one that is labeled advanced. The standard one is pretty much all the event tracking. So tracking, clicking on certain links, interacting with certain items, that kind of thing. And all the events that I do track is in the documentation if you are curious. The advanced option is labeled advanced because there's one additional step you would have to do if you would like to go with this option. And the advanced option, like I said, one additional step, but it involves using custom dimensions. And custom dimensions in Google Analytics, you must be a Google Analytics admin in order to do that. So if you are not the admin, you would have to get permission to do so. But honestly, it's a really simple process to set up, and I document exactly how you would do that as well. So yes, you would download one of these files and download to your local machine. And then of course, the next step would be to go back to your Google Tag Manager container. You can go to your admin area of your Google Tag Manager container and import that JSON file. Since you're working with a clean new Google Tag Management container, you don't have to worry about overwriting everything. It just directly imports all these tags, variables, triggers, everything you need to get started. After the import, in order to make this work, you will have to add your Google Analytics property to the Google Analytics variable. And it sounds complicated, but it's really not. Welcome to Google Tag Manager. If you haven't had a chance to play with it, you could go ahead, go under Variables, scroll down to the User-Defined Variable section, and it's called Google Analytics Variable Update Me. By default, in those JSON files, I just put like a dummy Google Analytics property, and you can just swap that out with whatever Google Analytics property you're using. Go ahead, save your changes. And then the other step you would have to do is, since it's a new Google Tag Management container, you want to enable some of those built-in variables. By default, Google Tag Manager doesn't like to have all these wonderful variables enabled, and that's because they're just trying to optimize the whole tag management system. So if you notice things that like click text is not there, you'll just want to click configure and make sure you check mark it. Once again, I have a whole list of what you need for the built-in variables to be enabled for this setup to work. Okay. Oh, last piece of advice. If you may not have noticed, I'm actually a very passionate data person and I like clean data. So if you are willing to try this example, download these pre-configured GTM containers, I would highly recommend just creating a new Google Analytics property for you to test them in. So you could just go into your Google Analytics, create the new property, which generates a new UA Google Analytics tracking number, and use that. What's nice about doing that, since you created that new property, you're probably going to be the admin, so it's not going to be a problem creating those custom dimensions later on. Additionally, if this messing with data does make you nervous, you can also create a new Google Analytics property and actually just play around in the Summon preview environment for your testing. Your data, of course, is going to be very limited because you're in the Summon preview environment, which very few people have access to. But it's a way for you just to see how everything is working. All right, step 4. You have to now sync your Google Tag Management container to your Summon site. And basically, there is no Google Tag Manager option in your Summon admin console. Instead, what you need to do is load it via JavaScript through there using the Summon 2.0 external script. So basically, you could add a JavaScript here that would go ahead and load your Google Tag Management container. And on the GitHub site, I actually even have an example of what that JavaScript could look like. You can download it, and all you have to do is switch out the Google Tag Manager number and with your own, and then add it to a server, and then connect it to your Summon admin console. Now, if you're one of those people that are like, oh, loading Google Tag Manager via JavaScript, oh my gosh, that will delay something. It actually is not so bad. I actually run both the Google Analytics option through the Summon admin console, and then I have a separate Google Analytics property that I use to deploy through Google Tag Manager. And I actually watch both of them, and I find very little data discrepancy between the two. So that was actually very encouraging. I was originally worried about data loss because sometimes it can take a little longer to load things through JavaScript, but I have not experienced that in my 2 to 3 years of doing this. All right, step 5, and this is only if you use the Google Tag Manager Advanced option, and that is to create those 3 custom dimensions in your Google Analytics property. And basically, it's already created in the Google Tag Manager container for you. You don't have to do anything there, but you will have to go into Google Analytics, specifically go to your admin area. And this is where you have custom definitions, including your custom dimensions. And basically all it is clicking the new custom dimension, giving it a label, and that once you click create, it assigns it with an index key, which is automatically set up in Google Tag Manager. So it knows that if you're looking at number 2, it's already synced to content type. Consider this the house where Google Tag Manager using Google Analytics kind of stores that data for you. Moving right along. Last, all you have to do is preview and publish your GTM container. And I have to say, if you haven't had a chance to really dabble with Google Tag Manager, this is where it gets really fun. Because one of the nice things about using a tag management service is that you can preview before you click that publish button. So I'm in the preview environment now. I click the preview button. Here is our summon instance, our live summon instance. And it can tell you what just happened. So here it tells me my page views tag for Google Analytics was just fired. I could go ahead, click on an item, and you can see all of a sudden more tags are being fired down here. I could even check to see what data is being collected. So this is the variables, little pieces of data in there that's being sent to Google Analytics, and I can see exactly what's being sent there. Oh, interesting. I think I saw a question pop up, but I will get to it, I promise. And then after you publish your changes, you'll start getting that data live. You can go ahead, sit back, relax, and start watching in real time as people start using your website. So here's the real-time reports in Google Analytics. I can actually just see what people are searching on now, kind of the events that they're doing, and everything that I would like to see. And of course, I also have that wonderful Google Data Studio report, so I can actually analyze the data in long term and share that data with who needs it. So I realized I covered a lot of content really quick. This wasn't designed to be an overview about how Google Tag Manager functions. That's definitely a longer conversation, but it's really just to share that if you are interested, you don't have to recreate the wheel. You can go to my GitHub, you can download it and play around with it in a safe environment. And I think this is where we leave off. You can feel free to email me. Additionally, if you do play around with my pre-configured Google Tag Manager containers, I'd be really interested in feedback on how we can improve the experience. Another thing I'd like to do instead is also start creating individual tags that we can all share, and I would encourage other people to start sharing their tags as well. Since we all use the very similar summon infrastructure, it's something that we can do and should be doing.
Also like to thank our presenters for the very informative presentations and everyone for being here with us. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.